Hey, horror fans, Pete here from the Lasser Cast, and we have a very special interview tonight. With me is Clay McLeod Chapman, who he is the one who co-wrote Quiet Part Loud, which we talked about on this channel, and he also wrote the book Ghost Eaters, which is on many top 10 lists for this year so far for 2022. A book of his, Wendell and Wild, was adapted into a movie that's on Netflix by Jordan Peele. So this is pretty much the year of Clay McLeod Chapman, right?
I mean, it's all over. I'm done. Like
You're
there's
done?
no
Okay.
more, like I'm just gonna call it quits, man. It's
Yeah.
I'm like waiting for the ball to drop and I just turn into a pillar of salt or something.
You've peaked. That's it.
Yeah. Oh God. I don't know. I mean, like, let's hope not. But yeah, it's been a good year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've kind of, you've been on my radar for a while. I read your comics first. I actually read this
Aw.
book Origins that you put out
Yeah.
a couple years ago, and I reviewed it on my other channel. And then
Nice.
Planet of the Symbiotes. I know you've done a lot of symbiote stuff for Marvel.
Yeah, yeah. I that really blows my mind. Well, first off, thank you for still wanting to talk to me after reading all that stuff. Origins was such a lark. That was take your Terminators, take your AIs, take all the kind of like the lovey-dovey sci-fi post-apocalyptic-y stuff and just put it in that blender and.
Yeah, and that was put out by Boom, right? Boom Studios. Yeah.
Totally boom.
Well, how did that work out? Because like that was based on an idea that a screenwriter had, right?
Yeah, there was this Hollywood brain trust. It's like it was three guys.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of those projects where there were ambitions for some sort of future film or TV something or other, and they wanted to kind of put a root down in the comic world, and I was fortunate enough to be tapped to write it.
Hmm.
But man, the art for that, I say what you will about the story and the writing, but like the artwork, like Jakob Rebelka he was stunned. Like working with him was worth it in of itself. Like I just kind of I feel like there are certain panels in that you just want to frame and kind of put in a gallery because his work is amazing.
Totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. I covered that for my other channel, and then I also covered Planet of the Symbiotes. And for Planet of the Symbiotes, like you have a lot of experience working with that character of Scream, right?
Yeah.
And now that's not the original Scream from like the '90s. I can't believe we're starting off with this stuff. I was gonna go right into like Ghost Eaters.
Right.
This is, yeah,
Amazing.
but,
I
but
mean,
like Andy is the girl that is Scream, right? Andy
Andy
Benton.
Benton, yeah.
Right, and then she goes by Silence now, right?
Yes, she does. It's
Yes.
it's astounding. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because there were certain symbiotes. There was the Life Foundation symbiotes, which was, gosh, am I going to be able to get this right? There was Riot, Lasher, Phage, Agony, and Scream. I think I got them all.
Yeah, nice.
It was like a crew, and I mean, at that point when they were first written, they didn't even have names. Like the names came much later, like maybe even years later.
Right.
But Scream was always this kind of like Scream kind of like took off on their own path. I think they became one of the more popular siblings of that particular generation. And
Yeah.
they went through a lot of different hosts, but then when Andy Benton came around, I think like the character really kind of shifted into a higher gear. And I was just really lucky. Like I just, I was given the opportunity to write for Scream and Andy and their kind of relationship. And I mean, it went on for a couple of years, and then COVID kind of,
Yeah.
knocked the wind out of those sails. And but it's amazing because like it's one of the first times where the fandom, the kind of the readers of Scream and the kind of the screamers, whatever
Right.
the fan base around that particular symbiote
Yeah.
really rallied to such an extent that like every opportunity that Marvel listened. Like it was
Yeah.
amazing. Like they
Yeah.
were like, oh wow, like people really like Scream, so let's put them in the Planet of the Symbiotes. Let's put them in, King in Black. Let's put them.
Like,
They it was purely because of the lip service of the fans and the fact that Marvel was paying attention, that they were like, oh wow, I guess maybe we should bring Scream back. But yeah,
yeah.
now it's silence, so we'll see where it goes from here.
Right, right. I don't know how old you are. I'm 40, so like all the symbiote stuff really kind of kicked off when I was in that like kind of 10 to 12-year-old
Yeah,
age. Are
I'm
you?
85.
Oh,
And
okay. So you
yeah,
remember when Spider-Man came out?
no.
Yeah, yeah.
Get off my lawn, you no, but I mean, like, yeah, like I was definitely of that first kind of round of symbiotes, and I mean, it was just it's kind of mind-blowing. Like, I mean, 13-year-old me would definitely be feeling very impressed with 100-year-old me, where I don't know if I would ever believe that I would ever get to write for a character like Scream,
Right.
or any of the other symbiotes. So I count my lucky stars.
Well, what would 13-year-old you think about the success that you've had with your horror novels?
I mean, God, it's so funny because, like, it's so. What am I going to say? I'm going to say it's been a long road to hoe. Like success feels very arbitrary, and I'm not gonna argue against the thesis. Like this is definitely been a great year, and this year has been kind of like probably one of the bigger years that I've experienced. But I feel like it just all goes away. It goes away so fast. Like like I've been in this kind of like that weird, when you come off of a high and there's just that feeling of like, oh, okay, now things are really quiet. All of a sudden, it's like, what am I gonna do? What's
Yes.
next? And like it all just kind of, it feels very ethereal and gauzy, and it never lasts. And so you take your good days and you kind of hold on to them, and then they kind of just like dissipate, and then you're like left with yourself.
Right.
And then you have to kind of be like, oh man, what am I gonna do now? And it's just so funny because I just like I've been writing, and I've been very fortunate to be able to publish for like, this is like technically my 20th year
Oh, wow.
of being in the industry.
Yeah.
And 19 of those years nobody knows who the hell I am. And I have a good year and it's like all of a sudden it's kind of like, I don't know if this is going to be a trend. I don't know if that's going to kind of dovetail into next year. I always feel like it's going to just disappear so quickly that because I know what it's like to be a unsuccessful writer,
Right.
and so we'll see how long I can ride. See how I can ride this wave.
Okay, cool. Well, I really kind of overdosed on Clay McLeod Chapman in the past like month, right? So I read Whisper Down the Lane, and then I read Ghost Eaters while I was listening to Quiet Part Loud, and I was reviewing that with Danny.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if this is indicative of all of your work in general, but from what it seems like with Whisper Down the Lane and Ghost Eaters, both of which I don't want to spoil.
Spoil away, man. Go
for
for it.
Away. Okay, all right. Well, we'll see then. Like, in those stories, it seems like there is a past that your characters are haunted by, and then there is a threat that they have to kind of face or deal with, and it seems like they're sort of like, to go back to Scream, they're sort of like in symbiosis with each other. And I was wondering, when you made at least these two stories, did you kind of come up with the idea of what a person was struggling with, and then you're like, well, how does that physically manifest into a problem?
Wow. That's a really interesting question. It's funny because I mean, I don't know if it would read this way, but both Whisper Down the Lane and Ghost Eaters are probably two of the more personal stories that I've ever written. Like usually, the layer of fiction or the kind of like calcium deposits of fiction and narrative just kind of layer up and layer up. So whatever is historical or personal to me is kind of like embedded or buried under a lot. But both Whisper and Ghost Eaters are books that layering is there's a little less layering. And not in any kind of like direct way. Like neither of those books are about me per se, but they're the kind of kernel, the genesis of them has a root in my own kind of personal history. So I think they're written about things that really scare me.
Okay.
And so with Whisper Down the Lane, it's this idea of like, excuse me, I'm a father, and fatherhood, parenthood ultimately like terrifies me. It's probably one of the most scary things I've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
And I am always kind of constantly aware of how I'm ruining my kids' life. And it's just that fear of bringing a kid into this world. And a lot of that kind of was baked into Whisper Down the Lane. And with Ghost Eaters, it's this idea of like, when you lose a friend, when you lose somebody who you were not there for them when you needed them the most, and the kind of remorse and the grief that comes with feeling like you failed as a friend, and how you when you lose somebody you love, that asking that, kind of posing that question of like, how far will you go to get them back? And yeah, so those were kind of the driving principles behind, one of the kernels or one of the kind of motors behind those books. But they like, I don't know, I think they mattered in a way to me because I was, the approach to them up front was like, well, what scares me? Just like asking the question.
Yeah. So you said that like the characters aren't necessarily based on you, but there's like a part of you in them. Do you have a person in your life that was like Silas from Ghost Eaters?
Yeah. I'm like waiting for the day when I get in trouble for this. But I had a friend who passed away from an overdose, and it was in my early to mid 20s. It's a long time ago now, but it happened at a point where like there was this particular circle of friends, and there was just this kind of joie de vivre, or this lust for life that we all had. And he had it the most. Like he was kind of this natural born Jack Kerouac, and it was just so easy to love him. Like it was just so easy to like follow him to the ends of the world. I was, this is like post collegiate, so like post undergrad, and like I'm kind of getting steered in a different direction from him, the kind of breakdown of our friendship at this point where like he was delving more into recreational drugs and harder drugs. And it was an awful time because, the thing that I thought I was supposed to do for him was to do the tough love route, like to like draw the line and be like, I'm not going to support this. I'm not going to, I thought I was doing the right thing by not being there for him, which, it was not the right decision, and I like that circle of friends, like I lost all of them. Like it was like just this whole kind of like moment in time where like who I was and who we were as a group of friends in our like early 20s, like 23, 24, like like it's just, I don't know, it's just it's a little gobsmacking to kind of think of it now, because you know I have few kind of regrets in this world, but who I was and the choices I made at that point are definitely, they're there. Those are the big ones.
I totally understand that. Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say that I had a Silas exactly, but I certainly had like a very charismatic friend that kind of had some of those qualities.
Yeah.
And I know that like you were on Dead Headspace a couple of months ago, and you were on the episode with Chance Forshee, right?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
the horror curator, and he, excuse me, he's one of those people that has Ghost Eaters on the top of his list for 2022. And I know that like the book really impacted him based on what he said. I think he said he even knew someone named Silas.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he has a Ghost Eaters tattoo, right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, that is impressive. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's really resonating with a lot of people. And I think the reason why Whisper Down the Lane and Ghost Eaters resonated so much with me is because for the main characters, they're very flawed, and they kind of are paying the price for choices that they make.
Yeah.
But then their perspective on things, I thought was like, oh, I kind of think like that, and I would make that reference there. And so they're very relatable, but they're very flawed, and I think that helps draw you into them too.
I mean, we're all flawed people. I am the worst friggin' person there is. Like, it's amazing how like I am not a fun person to hang out with, and like it's this like it's this funny, I don't know, like I've been thinking a lot about this of flawed protagonists, like this idea of like who, like when you're a reader coming to a book and you're kind of in essence taking the hand of these characters, and you're going to follow them for 200, 300, 400 pages, and a lot of them are going to be, I think they're going to be kind of poopy people.
Yeah, those are the most exciting ones to follow. I mean, I'm thinking of a bunch of examples, but one of the most glaring ones, if we're going back to comics, I think of like Jessica Jones. I think she has like a lot of issues, right?
Yeah.
And those characters, I think, are the most exciting because they show you something behind the facade that we don't usually get to see unless we really know someone pretty intimately, So I was going to ask you, though, because you said that there are parts of you in these books. You said before the recording that you used to live in Virginia.
Yeah.
I know that both Ghost Eaters and Whisper Down the Lane take place in Virginia. Did you ever live near McLean, Virginia, by any chance?
Oh my God, that's kind of like Northern Virginia, right?
It's by DC. Yeah.
Yeah. I was born in Roanoke, so over here, and then like raised in Richmond, which is like over here.
Right.
And then McLean is kind of like you gotta go north.
Because there's I was gonna say because there's Arlington, Virginia, right, which is near there, and there's a bar in there called Dr. Dreamos, and I just figured that would be a place that you would be at one point.
I'm gonna have to go to Dr. Dreamos now.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's there anymore. But when I was there, like in the the 2010s or so, it just was this awesome place. And like writers hung out there. They had like little comic book conventions there and stuff too.
Oh my God! So it's not there anymore. Like if I hunt this down, is it going to be just like a burnt lot or something?
It's probably like Smoothie King or something now. But it was awesome. Yeah.
Missed my chance. That's such a bummer. I never went.
Okay. I just had to see because I could just picture you there, even at like one of those conventions. But in Whisper Down the Lane, though, there's a lot of scenes that take place at school, and there's faculty meetings, and the main character is an art teacher. So that experience was very relatable because I work in education, and I could like really feel it. And so it made me wonder, was that your day job at one point in education?
I teach in a grad school, so not the public school system.
Okay.
But I mean, it's I've been very fortunate to have been able to kind of visit a bunch of schools and kind of do the kind of like visiting author thing, and it which is very different. But I think that like what has my wife used to teach, I still teach, so that the idea of like these faculty meetings where you go in and you're just like, what are we gonna do? Like, how are we gonna how are we gonna survive this? And like, the kind of ever evolving platform of education and the kind of dynamics between the students and the faculty. It's terrifying. That's something to really be scared of. Like, I mean, you're doing this now. Like, is this?
Yeah. I work in education, and specifically with students with behavior issues. And what's very interesting about your faculty meetings, the reason why it felt so realistic to me is because I've been in meetings with people like the characters that Richard was in the meeting with.
Oh my God.
And that whole mindset, I feel like, I know we're kind of jumping around all of your works, but like the people that are in Quiet Part Loud, that are the followers of the main character, I feel like you really got that voice down for that type of person, and you're right, that was going to be one of my questions coming up, was because you were talking about like how things scare you. And I think that whole mindset is very scary to me. And it sounds like you kind of touch upon that, like in Whisper Down the Lane, it's like dealing with satanic panic. And then with Quiet Part Loud, it's dealing with like the sort of the after effects of 9/11. But it's still the same kind of thing, though.
Totally. Well, it's so funny. I mean, like, Whisper Down the Lane takes place in like 2013, or at least half of it does. And then Quiet Part Loud is kind of like 2009. Like, we wanted to kind of pick, for Whisper, I wanted to pick a pre-Trump era.
Right.
And for for Quiet Part Loud, we were very cognizant of wanting to pick a pre-Trump era. But to do it in a way where, I mean, regardless of your kind of political affiliations or which way you lean, like, we all know where we are now, and we're living in this era now where there are kind of fresh satanic panics, and there are the kind of schisming of people's belief systems. So to write about, for either Whisper Down the Lane or for Quiet Part Loud to take place in the present tense, like present, meaning like 2020, 21, 22,
right,
it would, I feel like it would almost kind of take a certain wind out of the sails, where if it's pre 2016, we all know what's coming. We all see the kind of like, storm clouds in the horizon. They're there and they're coming no matter what happens in these books. So it's like, it's almost like writing about an era before cell phones, where it's like, any horror movie needs to take cell phones out of the equation because cell phones aren't scary. Like they don't have, so it's like you kind of have to take Trump out of the equation because we all know what that's like.
Yeah. And Danny and I actually talked about that when we would review your show. We would talk about the idea of like, the sort of the response to 9/11 was very scary because, in Quiet Part Loud, you guys show this a lot, but there's that response where American citizens, specifically New Yorkers, are upset with Muslim Americans, and and you can feel it, and it's like, oh man, but this is just like 2001, this is happening. It's like there's so much worse stuff to come down the road, and it sometimes it makes you just sit back and go, oh my God, I can't believe I lived through all of that, and I just think that like Quiet Part Loud and Whisper Down the Lane really do kind of capture that fear and that mania that certain people feel when it's like weaponized in both stories, it's a
Yeah.
very scary thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. And like that's before sonic parasites. That's before like actual devil. Like, you know, like it's the kind of the thing that terrifies me the most are people's belief systems that like, you know, like that's the real horror right there.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And so you co-wrote that with Mac Rogers, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm not familiar with Mac's work at all until I started listening to Quiet Part Loud. He has experience putting together these fictional podcasts, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, Mac he's a hoot. Like it's like we were really lucky. I mean, Monkey Paw and Gimlet were very kind to us to basically kind of run with this idea and create this series. Excuse me. Where, I mean, Mac had considerable kind of podcasting experience and has written for podcasts. And I've been able to kind of you know, dabble in a lot of the spooky stuff. So when it came time for us to kind of merge heads and merge minds and imaginations, it was I mean, like it was such a like it's a lovely little podcast baby because you know, I've never had as pure of a collaborative experience as I've had with Quiet Part Loud, and that's because everybody just kind of trusted everybody else to do the thing that they do best. And,
Yes.
you know, it was, yeah, I feel very, very fortunate and like immensely supported. And Mac and me, we got to write the story we wanted to write, and then they made it, which is like
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. How did you feel when you found out who was going to be on the cast for the show?
Well, you know, it's so funny. Like, you know, Mac and I started in earnest. We started developing this project back in like March 2020. No lie, like right before everything shut down.
Oh,
Like
okay.
we were like one of the last things I did public like in the world was basically to go on a walk with Mac to kind of like crack the story and figure out who Rick Egan was going to be.
Yeah.
And then like a week later, the world just kind of like shuttered. So you know, the pandemic experience was also the podcast experience, and you know, about a year of that was developing and writing, and then a year of it was casting and all the production side of it. So, and then the remaining kind of part of that was basically just trying to wait for our moment to kind of release the whole thing. So pretty much all of 2022 was spent in production. And then months of just casting. Like like I probably shouldn't say, I don't want to get in trouble, but it is amazing like who we went out to be like, what about this person? What about this person? And that was when everybody was at home anyways.
Right.
So it was like, you know, maybe getting a celebrity wasn't such a ordeal because, you know, they're all at home looking for work, you know, where they don't have to leave their apartments or their houses. But when it finally came to Tracy Letts, it was a godsend. It was perfect. It was perfect. Like, I honestly, I don't think the show would work were it not for Tracy Letts just being like, just leaning into it, like going whole hog. I really honestly feel like he is our linchpin, and that has everything to do with our director, Mimi O'Donnell. Mimi was the artistic director of the Labyrinth Theater Company here in New York. So to kind of tap into that world of all of these playwrights and performers, and I mean, it was like she was like, I want Tracy Letts, and I think it was kind of like they were like, yeah, but what about so and so, and she was like, no, Tracy Letts, and then finally we came back to Tracy Letts, and it was perfect. It's just perfect.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I mean, the sound design for the show is just so phenomenal too. You must sort of imagine it, and then like I think they probably when you heard the sound, it probably exceeded what you imagined, right? Because they did
I
such a good job with that.
mean, Gimlet went all out. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we gave them, I mean, the scripts we gave them, it's the kind of sonic equivalent of like a Godzilla movie, where
Mm,
you like the scope and scale of it is so it's so minimalist in on the page, but then when you're a sound designer and you're looking to kind of be the architect of this kind of sonic landscape, it just cracks open in such a way that I'm just very grateful and thankful that the sound designers are still talking to us, frankly, because I mean I think we really put them through hell.
yeah.
And but like it's there, like they like the work that they did. Oh my god, just the blank alone, like the monster, like that is a thing that like we spoke about or had like lengthy discussions of like what does a sonic parasite sound like
Right. Right.
what does an audio monster, how do you do that? And like we would kind of use these kind of constant kind of refrains of like the cicada sound, or the like we would have these kind of like correlatives in nature, or versions of like it kind of sounds like this or a little bit like this, and it all blends together.
Mm,
And but it's something completely different to be like, okay, now I have to make that, like I have to assemble that sound that you so eloquently wrote in your script.
right.
It's
Right.
like thanks a lot, jerks, like now I got to do what like you can write it any way you want, but I have to make it sound like something.
Yeah. Was it a steep learning curve to write a script for a podcast?
Um, I mean, yes and no, and beyond Mac and his kind of experience, like I mean, I feel like what's interesting about podcast scripts, or in essence radio plays, is that you're writing these films, but kind of doing it uh with your eyes closed, and you're kind of leaning into your other senses, and I love that. I mean, like I love writing for radio and I love writing for podcasts because you know as screenwriters, you're so kind of attuned to the visual medium, but there are so many other senses that you just disregard. And having the ability to write for a podcast, you're just leaning into sound, and like you know I I love to monologue, clearly. Like I love to like it basically it Mac and I just got to lean into our strengths, which is
Sure.
how to make things scary, and how to like I think it was just how am I can't I can't just I'm just speaking effusively of this experience because it was like just very happy with it. Like I feel like everybody was like really firing on all cylinders.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you definitely should be proud of it. I mean, for me, this is my first time I've ever listened to a fictional podcast, and I was just totally hooked. And I want to listen to more stuff, especially stuff made by Mac too. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, in your experience, like with your writer's toolbox, so to speak, how did you go about like filling that? Like, did you start out with like short stories, and you moved on to novels, and then you've moved on to comic scripts and radio dramas, or how's it? How have you done that?
I mean, it's kind of a funny cycle where like I first started off with plays. Like as a
Oh, okay.
kid, I wrote plays, and I I've always had this kind of love-hate relationship with theater, um, where I love the kind of personal connection between the performer and the audience member. So over time, my playwriting kind of evolved into monologue work. Like I loved I loved writing monologues that I could then perform for audiences, but they were all direct address. Like they were all kind of taking into account this listener, this kind of silent scene partner. And I wanted the audience to be a part of that experience. And what's funny about that is that those are just first person narratives. So all of a sudden, this kind of evolutionary, process of like playwriting to monologue writing kind of evolved into short story writing, like first person narrative writing.
Right.
Call Me Ishmael. Like it was just like
Right.
always, like it was always a part of like this kind of like weird, I'm the I'm the fish crawling out of the primordial ooze, but I still have my tail and my gills, and like I'm evolving into my fiction and my kind of literary era of my career. So yeah, like I was able to convince the theater people that these were monologues, and I was fortunate enough to be able to convince publishing people that they were short stories, but they were the exact same text. And that led to a life in publishing.
Do you find that one form is more challenging for you than the other? Like, I always wonder, because I write myself, and I've written some comic book scripts and I've written some prose, and I always find that like comic book scripts, I can write them more with ease because it's just like very straightforward description and then dialogue. Whereas with prose, it's sort of more difficult to like explain things, and sometimes I feel like I over-explain anything. Do you deal with those kind of issues too?
I mean, yes, totally. And I mean, I feel like what I love, if I'm being honest with myself, the times that my writing thrives is when I have an opportunity to collaborate with somebody. So comic book writing, you're collaborating with the artists, you're collaborating with a whole team of like the pencilers, the inkers, the colorists, the letterers, the editors. Like it's all there in the ooze, and it becomes something greater than any one particular contribution. Like the artist can't do it alone, the writer can't do it alone, but it's the kind of like it's the fact that everybody comes together and achieves something greater than the sum of their parts. Like that to me is what's amazing about comic book writing, filmmaking, podcasting. Like it's never done in a vacuum. It's never done just one person. With the writing, with like fiction, that's just me. That's just me in this room. And I feel very fortunate to have worked with the editors that I have, because if I'm on it, like if I'm just left to my own devices and I'm like just writing by myself for myself, as this kind of singular entity, I think it just becomes very myopic. It becomes very I don't know, like I don't see the light. Like it's just like a very hermetically sealed experience. Like even the fiction stuff, like I don't think I should be stuck by myself, because it's like Tang without the water. Like it's not like it doesn't like the experience of it alone is just not like it's not enjoyable. So I need that editor to be like, get out of your head, get out of like, like come to the light, like go this way. And I live or die off of the people I collaborate with.
Oh, okay. Well, that editor must be awesome for Ghost Eaters, because that's some really good Tang powder that you put out there, like,
but you want to, for real, like at Quirk, with these last 3 books I've done, I have 2 editors, and they kind of tag team with each other. And for Ghost Eaters, the first draft I turned in, the feedback that I got from my editors was basically, they gave me 3 words. It was opaque, plotless, and unrelentingly grim. unremittingly
Wow. Okay.
like there's no like getting around that. Like there's no like it's like okay, like there you go. Like those
Yeah.
are, that is that is a very true assessment of that first draft. So
So how much of a difference is there between that draft and the final book?
I would say, I mean, a pretty considerable one. Um, I think I did like maybe four, maybe five drafts on that one.
Okay.
No more than four, like three or four, let's say.
Sure.
And that first one is like pure head cheese. It's just pure like I am scraping the angst. I mean, it's like Nine Inch Nails poetry. Like I'm just like, like it's my moody goth kind of like,
Right. Yeah.
and they're like, so what's the story here? Like what's going on? Like how can we crack this open a little bit more?
Yeah.
So the next draft becomes the kind of structuring, like let's build out an architecture to this book. And then like the subsequent drafts become more about character and more about like how to kind of nail who these characters are. So
Yeah.
yeah. First
How,
draft, blah. Second draft, and then third and fourth draft is like, like yeah.
how long does each draft take?
I think it really depends, but like I think I mean I've been really fortunate that I I've been like I've been having a year to kind of work on these books. Like I like the kind of annual cycle of ending, like putting one book to bed at the end of the year and kind of embarking upon the next book at the beginning of the year, the new year.
Cool.
I don't know how long I can keep that up. I don't know if there's going to be enough reader interest, but for now, that's the cycle.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like reader interest is just continuing to grow. And I looked at some of the reviews, and Esquire had this one review on Amazon that compared it to Train Spotting and Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah.
And a couple of people mentioned like Nine Inch Nails poetry in there too. But what I was going to say was, I can definitely see the Train Spotting comparison because I feel like there's certainly one part of the book that's very much like Train Spotting.
Yeah.
But did you like rewatch any movies about addiction or read any books about addiction before you started writing Ghost
Oh my
Eaters?
God, yes.
Yeah.
That's all I read. Like I was reading like I really wanted to kind of immerse myself in Gothic literature, so like a lot of haunted house books
Mm-hmm.
and addiction literature, like a lot of like Train Spotting, William S. Burroughs, Bright Lights, Big City. So many. Like I wish I could call out, like drag them out of my brain, but like
Yeah.
I mean, like Junkie, Nova Express, Naked Lunch,
Yeah.
like just all the Hubert Selby Jr., like Requiem for a Dream,
Oh,
Last Exit to Brooklyn,
yeah.
you know, like I really, even like Charles Bukowski, I really, I feel like wanting to kind of nail the voice of an addict, but not have it feel sermonizing, not have it feel like I wanted it to be kind of like I wanted you to watch someone tailspin into their addiction.
Yeah.
So, and those were the books, like the Selby Juniors, like it had to be like those were the lodestars,
Mm-hmm.
for better or worse.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Gothic literature as well for the haunted part, like for the haunted house part. Obviously, addiction is one of the the pillars of the book, but then for the actual ghost aspect, I was thinking that my personal experience with ghost literature is pretty limited. My experience with ghosts are just from movies for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like with movies, ghosts serve that haunted house function where, like, as the audience, you're scared because you see them and they pop up, but they're not necessarily usually a physical threat. Like, they're scary for the sense of, like, you're scared to look at them, but they're not scary in the sense of, like, oh, they're going to hurt the person.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's exceptions to this, but I also feel like ghosts also kind of serve as like a metaphor for loss or grief. And I mean, I think you touch upon all of this in your book too. But did you intend to do something different with ghosts, with Ghost Eater?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I feel like the jury is still out of whether, like, how much new territory is forged. But like, I really love those books that kind of recontextualize hauntings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I love House of Leaves. I think House of Leaves is an amazing book, and I love that it made me look at hauntings, like the kind of notion of a haunted house differently. I mean, even something like a more recent book, This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. It's an amazing book. It's all about like a haunted Alexa, which is so, I mean, like, you say that, I say that, and it's just like, it's so much more. It's so much more.
Sure.
And it's this amazing book, but like at its core, it's about a haunted Alexa. And like, it makes you think differently about the thing that is the kind of quote unquote haunted object. But even like, I mean, like, the Haunting of Hill House, the like, like those stories that really, it's almost like it's like it deals with the kind of architecture of a haunted house more than it does the haunting, the ghost itself.
Right.
Oh my God. There's this one book. I'm not gonna be able to get the name right, and I'm gonna
Sure. Look it up. Yeah.
I'm gonna do that thing because I need to get this book, The House Next Door, by Anne Rivers Siddons. It's an amazing book. It's so deceptive in its packaging. Like, you would it doesn't hide the fact that it's a haunted house, but like, you look at the book itself and it looks like a Nicholas Sparks novel or something. Like, it's deceptive in its impact, but I love that book. Yeah. There's just too many,
Yeah. Well, I like I said, I haven't read many ghost books, right? But one thing I also forgot to mention was that sometimes ghosts are sort of used as like plot devices. If it's like a whodunit and the ghosts are there sort of like showing you clues. And and then, like you mentioned Hill House before, like I at least know the show of it, and I know that sort of messes with the idea of like time and ghosts, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that there's one sequence in Ghost Eaters where I started to actually get really scared, reading it. I was like, oh, like I wasn't expecting this. And I think that I just want to give you praise for that, because if I know what it's about a ghost, I'm like, oh, it's not that scary. But there was one part where I was like, oh, okay, now I'm getting scared.
So, what's the part?
It's when Erin goes to the dinner that her mom is throwing, and it to me, I haven't seen that movie. I mean, I guess this is kind of spoilers for your book, but like, there's that movie Bliss, and I haven't seen that movie Bliss, but I know that the premise behind it is essentially like everyone's like tripping, and it's just like a nightmare trip, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's what your book kind of is. It's like this sort of like nightmare trip that you can't escape, mixed with the supernatural. And I was like, oh, that's like losing your mind is scarier to me than like, oh, it's a ghost that might touch me,
Yeah. I loved Bliss. Bliss was great. Bliss was so much fun.
Yeah.
Ghosts, it's so funny because like there are these kind of trains of thought where it's like, ghosts in film or in literature, like they're there to kind of like speak towards some kind of hidden secret, or like something that's like buried in the past that like won't stay buried, and it like manifests itself as some kind of like guilt-ridden conscience that like needs to, you know, the truth needs to come out, that, you know, like whatever is buried must be unburied.
Right.
But then you get like poltergeists, then you get the kind of like the manifestations that like have some sort of kind of proactiveness to them. And you know, it's interesting, the kind of the mechanisms behind ghosts, and how, you know, certain movies go one way and others go the other way. And you know, I think of like did you ever see Stir of Echoes?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, you know, the book is amazing, the movie's amazing. Like I just love, like, I think that's a good one where it's like there's a mystery, and the ghost is kind of like, you know, helping kind of like navigate that mystery, but there is a certain kind of, you know, you just never know, like it's like you don't know you know, if the supernatural presence is a benevolent presence or a malevolent presence, or, you know, whatever it is. And so yeah, I love movies like that. And then you've got Poltergeist, where it's just like, you know, ghosts throwing things at you from all different angles.
Right. Well, I forgot to mention this too, but you know, you set the story in Virginia, and a big portion of Ghost Eaters is the fact that, you know, there is this sort of haunted presence to Virginia because it's such a big part of the Civil War. And you know, I only lived in Virginia for about 6 months, and I live in Texas now, and I've traveled to other states in the South, and there is that sort of that Civil War presence that you feel, and I really love it because you kind of throw in your commentary the way that you do in you know, Whisper Down the Lane and in Quiet Part Loud. You have that commentary about, you know, people's perspectives and stuff like that, and, you know, talk about the monuments and stuff and how everyone's obsessed with history in Virginia. I just thought that was very, very clever to use like, well, it's this whole big fucking haunted area because of battles. So that was a really nice touch too.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't lived in Virginia for over 20 years, but like my heart always goes back to Virginia. Like you know, like when I close my eyes and I say to myself, what am I going to write? Where am I going to set this story? Like it always goes back to Virginia. Like for whatever reason, like that is my narrative default. And that's just because that's where I grew up and that's what I understand. Like I know that region. I mean, I don't know if you know, don't quiz me on, but like, it's like, it's what feels natural to me. It just feels like home still.
Yeah.
Nobody wants a story about Brooklyn from me. Like that would be an awful story, but like Virginia, like I can do that.
Yeah. But you know what? As a guy who lived in Staten Island for most of his life, I think you did a really good job with Quiet Part Loud.
Okay, so you may be the first person from Staten Island that I have actually been able to talk to about this then. Because I feel like we got our geography like way wrong. Like Midland Beach to the hospital.
Yeah.
Like it's just like that's a lot of territory to cover on Staten Island. You couldn't get there on a bike ride.
It'd be a pretty long bike ride, but yeah. No, I mean, Staten Island itself is not that big, and so anywhere you go, it's going to take like maybe half hour by car tops. But on a bike, yeah, a bit longer. But the mentality of the people on Staten Island and the way that they talk and stuff, I felt like you got that right. Yeah.
Oh my god! Again, like Gimlet was amazing. Like we actually, it's so funny because like there are these stories where some of the actors that had been hired to play the Staten Island, some of the characters based on Staten Island. There's one actor, he kind of read through the script and he's like, you know, Staten Island guy wouldn't say it like this. They'd say it like this. And we were like, okay, yeah, go for it. Like that sounds correct. Like, so it is funny how it takes a village. We had our safety reads, our you know, and our Staten Island reads. So yeah.
Oh. Is a safety read like sort of someone that reads something to make sure it's not going to like offend people?
Well, yeah, sensitivity read. That's the word. Monkey Paw wanted to be very, you know, safe is not, I don't know if it's about being safe, but it's just like, be respectful. I mean,
Respectful.
there are a lot of different, we're coming at this story from a lot of different angles, and just the notion of, when your main character is a hate monger, is a fear monger, like it kind of gives you a certain amount of narrative protection, because we're basically saying, like, this guy's a jerk, like he's, he is who he is. But when it's the other characters that are kind of orbiting his world, beyond being kind of factually correct, we wanted to kind of be sensitive to just making sure that we were not going into an area that felt insensitive to Muslims, to New York, there's like a lot of different kind of angles that we just wanted to kind of be mindful of.
It's extremely, like, the subject matter itself is very sensitive, right? And Danny and I talked about this in our reviews, that, like, Jordan Peele, he makes movies that are obviously commentaries, often on race, but absolutely about just like class and different things that we see every single day, and that things can be upsetting to us. Did you have discussions with him about, like, what was going too far, like what he was looking for, like as far as the message?
Yeah, I mean, well, the monkey paw kind of ethos was always there. Like, it was always this idea of like the kind of basic premise from the get-go was, what if there is a certain kind of supernatural entity that is targeting minorities, and it was kind of posited in a kind of 3-season, 3 different seasons, where it would be, this season would be this kind of monster, and this season would be this monster, and this season would be this monster. And we, when we kind of, it was kind of a very basic log line of an idea that we then had to kind of crack it open. And the idea of Rick Egan as the kind of guide through this story was something that Mac and I really kind of pushed for, because it's one thing to be afraid about supernatural monsters, it's another to be afraid about people. It's in a weird way, it's like the Sean Hannitys and the
Tucker Carlson.
The Tucker Carlsons and the Alex Joneses, and the they're the real monsters. They're the people that, like, I personally feel afraid of.
Right.
That the supernatural entities within the Quiet Part Loud are almost a welcome respite from the real world horrors.
Right,
it's like, when the supernaturalness kind of comes into the narrative fold, you're almost like, whew, now, okay, this is fun. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like, the conversations with Monkey Paw were basically like, their big thing was they didn't want the audience to feel sympathy towards Rick by the end of the show. They didn't want him to be a martyr. And so, like, we were kind of like walking that line of almost, I mean, wanting to humanize him in a way that he wasn't some kind of mustache twirling evil guy, but that he was a flawed character. Like, he was one of these human beings who has made a whole series of bad choices that has led to this life, and he's never gonna make amends for those things. He's never going to, there's no apology that's going to take those things back. But it's just, how do you save, it's not how do you save your soul as much as how do you save the people around you? Like, how do you like what is the salvation for those that are in Rick's orbit? And that's his daughter, his friends, his Nor. So yeah, that was the big Monkey Paw thing. They didn't want him to be someone that the audience was like cheering for by the end of the show.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys made that point. I think that worked, and it sounds like there's potentially 2 other seasons for the show too.
I mean, it, you never do these things in a vacuum, right? Like there's no spoiler here, but it is something that has definitely been talked about. We'll see. I mean, there are cooler heads have to prevail and have to make those decisions. So us mere mortals just kind of are waiting in on the sidelines for other folks to say yay or nay.
Okay. All right. Well, if another season comes out, then Danny and I definitely will cover it. And I'm just looking for more podcasts to listen to and review,
Yeah. Oh my God. There's so many, like Limetown. You should check out the Wayfair tapes by Trevor Henderson, which is a new one that's been coming out. Yeah. There are a lot of like good spooky podcasts.
Okay. Yeah, and you've mentioned a couple of books. You mentioned some podcasts now. Like I didn't write them all down because I'm obviously going to edit this and listen back and then I'll write it down. But awesome. Yeah, you gave me some good suggestions here. So we pretty much have reached the end of our hour of recording, and it's been a real pleasure. Usually when we get to this point, I have the writer plug, where people can find them and find them on social media and like maybe something you might have coming out soon. So what do you want to drop?
Oh man. Well, hey, thank you. I mean, like honestly, thank you for bringing me on. Like it's the two of you guys were so phenomenal in your support for Quiet Part Loud. Like it was, it's so, I feel so silly because it's like we're like looking and like seeing like what the world is saying about it and your there's that moment where it's like we're gonna review all 12 of these 3 at a time, and I was like, oh my God, like if they're not into this, it's just gonna be so rough. Like
yeah.
So there was definitely like a huge sigh of relief that we got your seal of approval. But
awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah. I definitely covered like TV shows and stuff where we're like, oh, we're going to cover this show. And then we're like 2 episodes in. We're like, oh, Jesus, it'd be pretty rough.
Oh, man. But yeah, I would definitely encourage anyone out there to listen to Quiet Part Loud. Like it's a total lark. If you're driving to your family, for the holidays, like, here's 4, 5, 6 hours to, kill some time. But and then Ghost Eaters, I would totally love for people to check out Ghost Eaters. Like I, to justify my existence in the eyes of my publisher, I need to sell books. And then, other than that, like, yeah, I'm on Twitter. Well, as long as there's still a Twitter to be had.
Right.
I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, I'm out there. But and then I think those are the things, right? Those are the fun things.
That's the usual stuff people say. Yeah. Cool. Well, Clay, thank you so much for being on the show, and we would love to have you back if you ever want to come back on.
Anytime. And maybe I could bring Mac and we could chat about something else, maybe.
Heck yeah, we are definitely down for that. And I'll have Danny too.
Awesome.
Okay, we'll see you then.
All right, take care.
Thanks.